I had an exchange with my daughter who's away at college, and she shared a message with me, and I listened to it. And it's all about, revival in our country, and we got to get to revival in our country. And the way we get to revival in our country is the church has to do a better job. I fully agree with that. And I question myself every day, like, am I speaking truth? I made a little joke a while ago. I have the gift of confrontation. I do. I don't know that it's a gift. I don't know that I balance my tone right. The reason why I rail against transgenderism, the reason why I rail against the LGBTQ recruitment of our kids, the sexualization of children in books and school libraries that don't belong there because kids are not mature enough to handle it. The reason the left is going after our kids, wanting to put sexually inappropriate topics in front of them, is because they're trying to take our kids away from us. They want to control the kids. If you control the kids, you control the culture. And if you control the culture, eventually you control the country. That is what the left is doing. I made the comment on the stage at the Answer event last Tuesday night that the left loves to talk about sex unless it's the only kind of sex God ordains, which is between a married husband and wife. They find that to be, the left finds that to be stupid, inane, boring, but that's the only kind of sex God blesses, because that's the only kind of sex he gives permission for. Okay. So Kamala Harris says, God needs our help. He does not need our help. That is stupid. And then she goes on to talk about what's at stake in this election, and that we're all going to decide what kind of country we want. She's right about that. Let me refresh your memory on what she said in that regard.
Because in this moment, we do face a real question. What kind of country do we want to live in? That's before us right now. What kind of country do we want for our children and our grandchildren?
All right, so let me tell you what kind of country I want for my children and my grandchildren. I want a country where they can pray outside an abortion clinic and they aren't in prison. I want a country where they can go to a school board meeting and not have their license plate taken down by law enforcement. I want a country where our border is secure and where people who enter the country legally are later allowed to become citizens if they fulfill certain things and if they assimilate the values that they came with to our country into the values of our country. In other words, they become us. They don't expect us to become them, or even tolerate the stuff they bring from their country that does not fit with our values. I want a country where the party in power does not accuse the other party of being fascist, racist, Nazi-esque, and the like, simply because they disagree with the policies of their political opponents, where they do not try to imprison their political opponents, where they do not disparage a Supreme Court, threaten to pack it, and ignore Supreme Court rulings on rent moratoriums, affirmative action, student loan bailouts, and the like. That's the kind of country that I want. I want a country where the people in power do not try to get rid of the Electoral College because it is an impediment to them winning elections. I want a country where we don't add the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico as states solely because you know that will give you 4 Democratic senators and thus will allow you to claim more power, not on merit, but by strong-arming your way to do it. That's the kind of country I want. I want a country where there's freedom of speech. All speech, even hateful speech. Even the most hateful speech. Because speech is not a threat to anyone's safety. It is not a threat to anyone's safety, ever. If it makes you feel bad, that's on you, because you are giving power to someone else's words over you. Whatever slur somebody utters toward you is indicative of how small-minded the person is who utters the slur. It says nothing about the person to whom or at whom the slur is directed. That's the kind of country that I want to grow up in. That's the kind of country I did grow up in. That's the kind of country I want my children to continue to grow up in, and that I want my grandchildren to grow up in. And that is why I'm voting for Donald Trump. I am not voting for Donald Trump because he is my savior. I have a savior, and the savior that I have has done the work of a savior much better than Donald Trump ever could. Donald Trump is a vessel. Donald Trump is someone who stands for more of the things that I want our country to stand for than his opponent. That is what an election is. That is what an election is. You pick the best option. You don't get to pick a perfect option. You get to pick the best option. And the option between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is not remotely close if you share my vision for the kind of country that you prefer your children continue to grow up in, and the kind of country where your grandchildren can grow up in. It's not even close.